One day, Elijah Twible was confronted with a question. How would he present his very important AP Lang project?
How will I present my very important AP Lang project?
He thought and he thought, but he could not come up with a single idea.
I can't come up with a single idea!
One night, he felt depressed because he could not think of a good idea for his AP Lang project. So he watched his favorite movie of all time, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Then he got it!
I got it!
He would follow in Bill and Ted's footsteps. He hopped into the time machine he kept out back, and gathered up a ragtag group of authors to conduct the most unbelievable series of interviews the world has ever seen. Before we introduce the first of our interviewees, because it is a required part of the project, we present a clip that summarizes early America. This early America, an era that took place from 1600 to 1800. The British colonies in North America have been founded by people from all walks of life. Those fleeing from religious persecution, those searching for exciting new frontiers, and those simply seeking a profit. This is George Washington. The American people dislike that they are being taxed without representation. And now they have decided that they have had enough. The Redcoats are going down. Tally ho!
The first of the authors that we will be interviewing is Patrick Henry. Good morning, Mr. Henry. How are you?
I can't believe it! I can't believe it! Oh, I just can't believe it.
Honestly, you've been here for a week. Why can't you just accept the fact that we won the...
I said, give me liberty or give me death! And I was given liberty and freedom!
Didn't we take you into the future during that speech?
Yes, I was protesting the Stamp Act of 1765, enacted by those British scoundrels.
So anyways, can you tell us something about the tumultuous times?
I am a true defender of freedom. Samuel Adams and Thomas Paine, we are leading the movement against the tyranny of the British in this great decade, the 1760s. And as James Otis once said,
no taxation
without representation! Freedom! America! God bless the USA!
So as you can see, the early American writers were very spirited and full of vehemence. Their lofty rhetoric is characteristic of the era. Our next interview is with the well-known hero of the American Revolution, Benjamin Franklin. Mr. Franklin, thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thanks for having me. I say this because a man who is not thankful for being interviewed is not very wise indeed.
Alright, well, let's get started. Mr. Franklin, you are rather famous for being a bit of a Renaissance man. That is, you seem to be involved in just about every area of life, having made a significant impact in the areas of literature, science, politics, mathematics, among many other things. Why did you choose to pursue your interests in so many different fields?
If a man is able to do good in the world, he has a responsibility to do so. I've always been gifted at many things, and I pursued them as I could.
Mr. Franklin, you of course are famous for books such as your autobiography and Poor Richard's Almanac. But we've brought you here tonight to discuss one of your less serious titles. I believe it's called Fart Proudly? Could you tell us a little about that?
Aha, yes. I have been told that it was published. It was originally just a letter to my good friend Richard Pierce, but I wrote the essay when I was asked for a scientific essay by the Royal Academy of Brussels. I thought that they were being rather pretentious, so I invented my essay on the effects of different foods on the smell of flatulence. I never actually submitted it, but it was a good laugh. For those who are unable to laugh are unable to live.
Alright, thank you very much, Mr. Franklin.
It was a pleasure.
The movement is American Romanticism, a movement that lasted from 1800 all the way to 1860 in the beginning of the Civil War. This was an era of massive expansion through the Louisiana Purchase.
Yes, you give us all the money and we give you Louisiana, okay?
The Mexican-American War.
Mexico, give me all your land.
There was also a president named Andrew Jackson who used the veto. Way too much.
Hello, Mr. Emerson. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. The world looks so beautiful today, doesn't it? See this flower? I found it nearby someone's home. Isn't it lovely?
So, Mr. Emerson, I know you're very into the concept of transcendentalism. Could you explain what drew you to this?
When I was younger, I obtained a job at a church as a junior pastor. I stayed busy during the time as I was also one of the chaplains of the Massachusetts legislature and a part of the committee for the Boston schooling. But when my wife fell ill and passed, I began thinking differently. I needed to see the world from a new view and broke from the church. I believe this is where I started my work as an individual, with a better view of the world. I do not believe in organized religion, but nature is truly divine.
I see, and this is what you base your works around, correct? Could you explain your favorite piece to us?
What I believe to be my greatest work is an essay called Self-Reliance. It's a declaration of what it means to be a man. And the importance of being able to rely entirely on yourself.
Well, that sounds absolutely wonderful. Now, you say the world is lovely. How are you currently enjoying the world as it is now? I believe you've been here for a while now?
I have. It's most definitely been an intriguing experience. Everything is so industrial now, and the buildings are so much taller. But sadly, there's little nature to be found in these areas. It's rather upsetting.
Well, there are nature reserves and parks, if that's any consolation.
Astounding. I must go see these at once. Farewell.
Thanks for joining us! Our next interview will be with Walt Whitman, another romantic author. He's most famous for Song of Myself. Thank you for being here tonight, Mr. Whitman.
Thank you for having me tonight.
So, could you tell us about your early life? How did you end up becoming an author?
When I was young, I met a whole bunch of lawyers, and they introduced me to the printing process. That's how I found writing and books.
So, Song of Myself has been called your central piece. Could you tell us what it's about?
A Song of Myself is about myself. It's and the power of the individual.
Alright, thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
The rise of realism. An era that spanned from the Civil War to 1914, developed when the Romantics emerged from the solitude of their woodland retreats to witness the destruction of the deadliest war in American history.
I'm dying! I'm dying!
He's dying! There's a real world out here! Oh my god! Our next interview is with Mark Twain. Hello, Mr. Twain.
Good day! Have you tried this drink they call Coca-Cola? It's absolutely invigorating!
So, I can see that you've been here in 2014 for quite a while. How do you like the modern world?
Indeed, I've enjoyed myself immensely. But the youth of this day and age are strange. I was walking down by the river, and a couple of guys asked me if I was at the Colonel Saunders convention. Do you know what that is? My confusion was only intensified when they brought me to dinner at this delectable conveyor of chicken-related goods, KFC.
So, anyways, can you tell us something about your childhood?
As a matter of fact, I'd be delighted. I was born in the year of 1835 on November 30th. Mark Twain was my pen name. I was originally called Samuel Clemens. My father died of pneumonia when I was about 11. Goodness. And I became a printer's apprentice because I had no way of providing for myself. And I just kind of picked up the trade along the way.
When did you begin writing?
My first writings were journalism pieces that I penned in the early 1860s. The piece that brought me to fame and prestige as a writer was The Notorious Frog of Calvert County, which was featured in the New York Saturday Press in 1865. I had actually intended to have it published in a book depicting the exploits of the Wild West, but my response was belated.
And where did the inspiration for The Notorious Jumping Frog of Calaveras County come from?
During my travels, I spent an extended period of time in Angels Camp, California. And I heard many short anecdotes of the same nature as the one expressed in the story, you see. My use of colloquial language, contrasted with the indiscernible banter of the old man, is exemplary of the culture of the era.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. You need to get back to 1855 so that you can publish your new book.
Very well then, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn won't complete itself.
Our next interviewee is Mr. Jack London. Hello, Mr. London. How do you like the modern world?
I hate it.
Come again?
This world ever seeks more imaginative ways of annihilating itself. Pollution, pesticides, cancer, the very air smells of death.
Is this your naturalist instinct?
Of course, nature's not subject to the whims of man. No, it is a dynamic force.
Like Star Wars?
I cannot stand you.
So, how did your upbringing influence your ideology?
My first encounter with nature was in 1906, when my family's home was burned down in the fire that resulted from the San Francisco earthquake.
So you feel hostile towards nature?
My family was already impoverished, but the fire destroyed everything. As if nature was...
So, was Call of the Wild influenced substantially by your own personal experience?
No, I simply understand it. Take Call of the Wild, for example. The story of a domesticated dog named Buck, sold into the service of the Alaskan wild. It had overcome brutal treatment by relying on instinct. He had to put trust into nature. The same happened to me.
So you're a dog named Buck.
It is my personal experience.
Well, thanks for coming.
After a war that some of the time called the War to End All Wars, America immediately went into an era of partying and hedonism known as the Roaring Twenties. America then immediately got a terrible hangover and entered into the greatest depression this world has ever seen.
I'm depressed. Our next interview is Mr. John Steinbeck. Hello, Mr. Steinbeck. Please have a seat.
No, I'd rather stand on my own 2 feet. You know, my family was immigrants in America. I lived in a small rural town and had a passion for writing like no other.
Yeah, there are many modern iterations of the story. How do you like the modern world?
Yes, you could say that. My story of Mice and Men is based off the struggles the migrant workers face. It's very comforting to see that it still has a place in this modern society. Well, the Broadway version of Mice and Men was quite a hoot to watch. Have you seen that, James Franco? I mean, wow. What were we talking about?
Modern society?
Oh, right. Well, things are a lot better since the Great Depression. All these new programs to help those in need really warms my heart. There, that should make a nice headline story. Who do you work for anyway?
I'm freelance. Thanks for the interview. Our next interviewee tonight will be James Thurber. Mr. Thurber, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, I see you have something on your eye.
Well, I can't actually see out of this eye because when I was a boy, I was playing William Tell with my brother and he missed, so...
So, what sort of writing do you do? Like, what style?
The writing I do is mostly comedy. I'm from the modern era, so it's harder to define a little bit. And it's all humorous. I did some cartoons as well.
So, Mr. Thurber, can you tell us about your most famous short story, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty? And our time's almost up, so thank you for being here, Mr. Thurber.
Secret Life of Walter Mitty is actually somewhat based on my own story. Because of my eye injury, I developed something called Bonnet syndrome. I don't have any sort of mental instability, but I occasionally have vivid visual hallucinations. Walter Mitty has something similar where he just floats out of real life, though I think the key difference here is that my hallucinations have always been intrusions on my daily life, whereas his are more of an escape. And so the story ultimately has an open-ended ending, because that's not redundant. Ladies and gentlemen, from 1939 to the present day, we present the contemporary era.
We shall defend our island, whatever the cost may be. We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender.
We will stop at nothing to contain communism. Down with the commies! Down with the pinko commies!
I have a dream! Victory for America, the best country ever!
Our next interview will be with Amy Tan. Hello, Amy, and thanks for being on the show.
Well, thanks for having me.
So, I know that your Chinese heritage affects your personal experience a lot, and I've heard that personal experience was a big factor in your book, The Joy Luck Club, so can you tell us more about that?
Well, my book, The Joy Luck Club, has a lot to do with my personal experience because my mother was in a very abusive marriage when she was in China and had 3 daughters that I've never met until very later in my life when I reconnected with them when I'm in America.
Okay, thanks for being on the show. We're almost out of time, so thank you for coming. Bye.
Thanks for having me.
Our next interviewee will be with Alice Walker. Hello, Alice. Thanks for being on the show. So, Mrs. Walker, you're a very famous author in the African American community, and you recently went to Hollywood. How do you feel your early education factored into your success?
Well, I grew up in Georgia, and my mother was one of those people who didn't take anything from anybody. And when someone told her that her children shouldn't learn, well, she done up and enrolled me. Well, Grandpa told me tons and tons of stories, and I learned to read and write. And they inspired me, and I was writing from a young age, you know.
No way, that's so interesting. So, why did you decide to set The Color Purple in the 30s and not the 60s?
Well, racism is a constant issue, and I was born in that time and experienced it there. Some people are more familiar with other time periods, but I felt it was more important to stick with what I knew best.
Wow, that's really cool. How do you feel that our modern society has changed since the past?
Well, I feel like we've come very far in terms of progress, and there's still a ways to go, but in the current pace of progress, things have come very far. It's very gratifying to see years and years of progress come into this.
Alright, well, our time's almost up, Alice, so thanks for coming tonight. It was good talking to you.